I'll hit record.
All right, are we ready to go?
I think we are.
Okay, terrific. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Katie Dykes here. I'm the commissioner at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So thrilled to be part of this discussion today related to this is our informational meeting related to the new e-bike incentive that DEEP has the distinct honor to be helping to administer and craft for the state of Connecticut. I know that I'm thrilled about the passage of Senate Bill 4, which authorized us for the very first time to be able to provide support for Connecticut citizens to purchase e-bikes. And we're delighted to have the engagement from so many folks joining us today on this virtual meeting to make sure that we are getting the best information and expertise from the community and folks knowledgeable with respect to e-bikes and active transportation to help us design these rebates in a way that will really accelerate adoption and help us to achieve all of the different air pollution, mobility, and decarbonization goals that Senate Bill 4 was designed to accomplish. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our esteemed team in the Air Bureau. Tracy Babbage is our Bureau Chief, and other members of her team are helping to organize today's public listening session. But just wanted to, again, say welcome and express great appreciation to everyone who's joining us virtually today.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Again, for everyone, I'm Tracy Babbage. I'm the Bureau Chief of the Air Program here at DEEP, and I'd like to add my welcome as well. It's great for all of you to join us. We really appreciate you taking time in the middle of a summer to give us feedback and join us for this conversation. I'm going to start us off, and I'm going to have our team introduce themselves individually. Several of us are going to be going through a series of slides, but we're really here to hear from you. As the commissioner said, we're really excited and interested to get your input as we frame up this program. I'll just quickly give you a quick tour of the agenda, so you know how we're structuring today's conversation. I'll start with a very brief overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Walter Baruzzi from our team to talk a little bit more about the development of our of the RFI and some specifics in there. When we move to the public comment period, we are going to start with pre-registered speakers. And I know we only had a few that pre-registered, but for anyone on today's call that would like to provide comments and feedback to us, when we get to that portion, we're going to ask folks to indicate that they'd like to provide comments and note that in the chat, and we'll just call everyone sort of in order as we go through that process. And then we've left some time to talk about next steps in terms of where we're going. So that's the agenda. And I'll just start off with a quick reminder on Public Act 2225 and the e-bike section in particular, in terms of what the statute really requires us to do. So our plan is to establish and administer a rebate or voucher program to allow and enable purchasing of e-bikes. We're doing this and conducting this process in consultation with the Cheaper Board. And the role of the board is to provide feedback and input in terms of the incentive levels and establishing the maximum eligibility for the rebates and vouchers. The rebates or vouchers, in terms of the low end, it's not less than $500. One of the things that we're looking at as we design this program, and we're interested in your feedback on, is how we best design the program to maximize air quality benefits. In addition to that, we really see this as an important component to reach environmental justice communities. So the statute calls for prioritizing residents of EJ communities, and specifically residents having household incomes less than or equal to 300% of the poverty level, and also residents who participate in state and federal assistance programs. And then in terms of e-bike eligibility, the e-bikes must have a base MSRP cap of less than $3,000. So those are the major parameters of the program that are outlined in Public Act 22-25. So I'm going to turn it over to Walter to walk us through a little bit more on the e-bike program development efforts.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Walter Barozzi, and I'm in the Mobile Sources Group, and I'm supervised by Paul Kritzler in the Mobile Sources Group, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to go over sort of where we are and sort of where we're going with the e-bike program development. Essentially, we're looking at a couple of different bins, and if you follow along on the next slide, Tracy, thank you. Sort of the framework, an overview of the framework right now. We've issued an RFI, and we've scheduled this this informational session, this listening session, and further down the line, we're looking to develop the scope, develop an SOW, issue SOWs, and assess responses. It's a big lift. We're also going to have to take a look at contractors. So there's a lot that's going on. There's going to have to be outreach and marketing. Some of this falls into some of current scope of work that we have with a vendor that we have, CSE, that runs cheaper for us, administrates cheaper, but some of this will most likely end up having to go out for additional contracting. So essentially, it's a big lift, and as you can see, we're looking hopefully at a program launch the first quarter of 2023. We're already through pretty much halfway through July, and we can at least tick off some of those tasks that are listed in that first box. So again, just to talk about what we've done so far, we have issued that RFI. We have some questions that have gone out. We're hoping we get lots of responses, and that went out. We're holding this session, and we're hoping that it's fruitful. It's certainly a new program for us. We haven't had a lot of experience with bikes. We're mostly with EVs. Next slide, please. So again, these are some of the things we've already accomplished, and they were in that first bin of the overview. We've developed and sent out an RFI. We're holding the public informational session today, and sort of this is just an overview, sort of where we are right now. If we can go to the next slide, Tracy. So there is a new e-bike webpage that's linked towards the end, but it's also linked here. And the underlined verbiage right there, that also links to the RFI. And essentially, we're really requesting information from you folks out there that have expertise in this area. The RFI deadline, that's July 27th, and hopefully people will take the time to really review the questions in the next slide. And these are just for reference. They're taken directly from the RFI. But essentially what we're trying to get at is some of the challenges that we have here are the e-bike program is not within the current contract that we have for cheaper. So there are going to be new requirements. There's going to have to be a new portal, a new application, and a new IT work that's done. There's a requirement for income verification, and because there's also we want to go towards a voucher. We have to determine how we're going to keep track of these vouchers. Currently, cheaper uses a license, driver's license number. So how are we going to do that with bikes and with individuals? Drivers, cars also have VINs. So we have to figure out a way of tracking individual bikes as well, figuring out what are some of our point of contact. So what other trade associations? We're familiar with People for Bikes. We'd love to know if there are other ones out there. We're still at the beginning process of figuring that out. And just what is the retail universe out there? There's some known and unknowns. I know that we have received some lists of potential bike shops, and just from our anecdotal experience, some of those shops don't exist any longer. So the lists might be out of date. Sort of how are we going to determine what we do with online bike purchases? That's a big segment, and something that we've also discussed internally. With the cheaper program, there's a requirement for a minimum period of how long the car can be registered, has to be registered within Connecticut and remain within Connecticut. So how would that determine the structure of the program, the e-bike program, talking about retention so we can maximize VMT? Okay. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Paul Kritzler for the comment session.
Hello. Good afternoon. Yeah, we are going to talk, just open this up to registered speakers first to talk about all of the challenges that we mentioned. We welcome comments on all of the RFI questions that we've put out. Even if you're planning on putting in some written comments, we'd love to hear from you again here, just so we can hear those issues multiple times. So what we're going to do is, depending on the number of speakers, I think for now we can probably give each speaker 10 minutes or so. And then move on to the next speaker, and we'll see how that goes, whether we need to adjust that timeline. So the first speaker that I have registered is Kate Rosen. So if Kate, you would like to unmute.
Hi, thank you for having this today. It's helpful. I'm going to jump in with just a few comments. Obviously, first, thank you. I know that it is putting together an entirely new program, and that is incredibly laborious, while you're also going through restaffing after a massive wave of retirements. That being said, I think whatever the program can do to make this as easy as possible for low-income individuals, that would be one point. The other is question 10 on the RFI, how should DEEP define maximum income eligibility? Again, I think we should be aiming to be as inclusive to start. And the spirit of the bill in which advocates worked on it was that it was an e-bike program for as many people as possible, to maximize the amount of emissions reductions and vehicle miles traveled. The other thing that I would like to mention is that I would strongly encourage DEEP to collaborate with Department of Transportation. We have a pre-existing app, the CT Rides app, that allows users to be able to calculate their emission savings based on miles traveled either by bike, foot, public transportation, or carpool. And that's already an app that exists. I'm sure that you could probably do some back-end tweaking if you were concerned about their way of collecting emissions data. But I think it would be great to see some cross collaboration between the two agencies. And then I'm mostly looking forward to hearing other people's comments. I'm working on my RFI responses now. Some of these questions are a little intense for advocates versus people who work in the industry. So that's all I have. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kate.
Could we follow up with some questions if possible, just to probe a little bit on some of the issues? Because I thought that CT Rides comment was great. Just one quick question, Kate, does that rely on the individual to upload their mode of transportation, the number of miles, sort of that point A to point B, and then keep refreshing that for each trip?
So you can input your data from a couple different sources. I use this app Strava, which is an app for bicyclists, and my data automatically goes in. But if you use any kind of like walk tracking app, your information can go right in, but it does have an option for manual entry. And what's very nice about it is you get this great little dashboard that tells you, how much money you're saving, your emissions reduction, and the cost of what that behavior looks like against the cost of gas, which is obviously a big deal for a lot of people right now.
And how do you spell the name of the app that you use for bicycling? Strava, S-T-R-A-V-A?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker that I have on the list is Thomas Regan-Lefebvre. So if you could unmute.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Thomas Regan-Lefebvre, and I am the coordinator at the Transport Hartford Academy at the Center for Latino Progress. I am an advocate for modes of transportation which are environmentally sustainable, equitable, and accessible. I want to start, I can't be more excited that e-bike vouchers are coming to our state. I want to thank all the advocates, the member of the City Legislative Assembly, and the civil servant at DEP who work very hard on making this transformative program happens. Since the passing of SB4, I have been receiving constantly questions about the detail of the program. People who ask, when is it coming, and so on, so on. And in the meantime, I keep meeting people who just bought their e-bikes and who have no idea that an e-bike vouchers is coming up. So the first key point I want to stress is that we need to get the communication right. Communication to bike shops and as well as communication to the general public. And I think what we should avoid is talking only to the bike community, which is pretty well informed in general about what's going on in the industry. So what I would highly like to see happening is a clear campaign promoting the use of e-bikes as a means of transportation, which bring the benefits of being economical, reliable, enjoyable, and healthy, on top of being environmentally sustainable. And this campaign should primarily target environmental justice communities. And I would recommend to create a dedicated website. I would recommend to use pop-up windows on the DEP website. But with more efficacy, I would suggest to invest in radio ads, in particular community radio station or popular stations such Radio La Bomba, or in community newspapers such as La Voz Hispania, which are very cost effective. You get very good readership and audience through that. On the implementation of the program, I would like to stress that the key element is to aim for the best user experience for the seller and for the prospective buyer. It is essential that cash flow of small bike shops is not undermined by long refunds. For the buyers, the experience should be also very smooth with as little paperwork as possible. It should be very clear, very concise and communicated step to receiving the vouchers, and that should be accessible to everyone. Receiving the rebate should not require an address or passport or a birth certificate or require standing in line for many hours. It needs to be accessible to the folks who need it the most, many of whom can be at work, may not have a home address or a passport. And I would hope that information as well on financing opportunities be added to the website that you are going to create. And this is a question from the backshop manager of our organization from BCCO. We have two shops, one in Hartford, another one in West Hartford. So are these rebates available for backshops? Are funds available to support the backshop buying up e-bag inventory? So that's a key question here. And for most shops, it is an expensive gamble, and it is important for the success of this program and for keeping the e-bags on the road that high quality bags are available through buying inventory. The rebate doesn't do any good if someone can only buy low quality bags that will break down. They may save a couple of $100 on the initial cost, but we end up paying that and more over the next year, or to keep the bag running, or to buy replacement parts. How can we support small bag shop to feel secure in ordering costly product that may sit on the shelves? That's it for my part, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you,
just
Thomas.
A quick follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
Just one quick follow-up question. I like the idea of marketing. I think marketing is going to be incredibly crucial to the success of this program. Excuse me. But given the time lag that we're probably going to see in implementing the program, do you have a sense as to how close the marketing should fall? You know, my concern is if we start marketing too soon before we're ready to implement the program, that it may have a chilling effect on sales. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, if we don't give people enough notice, then there's going to be buyer remorse, perhaps, for people that feel that they, could have pushed off that sale for a month or two. So I was just wondering if you had thoughts on that.
I'm not a marketing expert, but I will suggest that you market it when you have something solid and operational, and a bit ahead. You can say this maybe a couple of weeks ahead that this program is coming, and so on. If you think of realistically to have the program running on January 1st, it may not be a bad idea because there is the holiday season, people buying gifts and so on, to say that this program is coming up and so on. So people who were thinking of buying e-bags for Christmas and other holidays can hold off for a little bit.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Thomas.
I
have two other speakers that I'll get to. If you are interested in speaking, can you please put your name and identify yourself in the chat so we can queue you into the speaker list, and we will, after these two speakers, we will move on to that list. Thank you. The next registered speaker is Ashley Seward.
Hi, this is Ashley. Thank you so much for organizing this listening session. I've been following along and been a part of this for a while, so I appreciate it. I'm coming from People for Bikes. I'm Deputy Director of State and Local Policy, and we're a trade association that represents the US bike industry. So thank you again for all your work on this. It is so exciting. I just have a few high-level comments, again, similar to some other folks on the call. I just wanted to see where you all were at with the program so far, and see what questions you have in addition to what was listed in the RFI. But a few of the high points I wanted to talk about was the first question considering e-bike, the different types of e-bikes that would be allowed in the program. And I just wanted to highlight that I believe that all e-bikes within the 3-class system should be allowed. you know, a lot of people think of just like the city leisure bikes, but, you know, cargo bikes, mountain bikes, like all forms of e-bikes can be used for transportation. So just wanted to highlight that different types of e-bikes suit different types of people. So it's good to have a variety available. I also wanted to add on the e-bike retailer selection and inclusion question, just the importance of including both in-store and online retailers. I know you guys had some questions about the administrative side of including online and just the whole administrative side of working with bike shops in a program like this. So I understand that, and I'm happy to help where I can, but it's important to include both online and in-store as it aids in that diversity of bikes and price ranges that are available to folks, which is super important. I also wanted to highlight and just again applaud you all for all your work on this. This is like one of the fastest moving policy spaces that I've seen in a long time. It is lots of states and local municipalities are interested in it. I feel like I see new programs all the time, and it's very fast and new for a lot of people. So we're all kind of working to create the, you know, best program that we can, but for each area, it's specific to your unique communities and everything. So I just wanted to highlight the importance of working with your local advocacy groups and your bike shops as well. I don't know if maybe an additional listening session just for bike shops or advocacy folks, but bike shops specifically, just because there is that additional administrative layer that is different than working with electric vehicle rebate program. It's just important that to include them and make sure the logistics of the program works for all parties, as it will aid in the success of the program overall. And we have a lot of contacts in that area as a trade association, so I'd be happy to help in any way with connections there. And lastly, I wanted to highlight Kate's point that she made earlier for determining air quality benefits of the program. In Colorado, I'm based in Colorado, but we had a pilot state e-bike incentive program, and we used an app that was created by NREL to track the program participants' ridership and the carbon displacement that was included in that. So it's great to hear that Connecticut has an app. So if you are able to collaborate with the DOT in doing that, that'd be wonderful. But that's just such a great way to measure the air quality benefits of the program. And I wouldn't make it mandatory. That can kind of turn people off sometimes, but you know, including rewards or other ways to incentivize people to use the app is a great way to get folks to use it. So thank you.
Thank you. I actually have some follow-up questions myself. So you talked first about the three classes of e-bikes. Do you mind just giving a quick summary of what those three classes are in just a few words?
Totally. Yeah, so the three-class system, it's been in place for about 7 years or now. So we're at 38 states that have adopted the system. It's three classes. So the first one is bikes that have assisted speed up to 20 miles per hour. The second class is bikes that have a assisted speed up to 20 miles per hour, but with a throttle. And then class 3 is assisted speed, no throttle, up to 28 miles per hour. This is all within a 750 watt range, but this has been accepted across 38 states as it gives electric bicycles similar rights and duties to that of a traditional bicycle. And it's the industry accepted definition of what is an electric bicycle.
Oh, great. I guess I have a few other questions for you. You mentioned local advocacy groups and you having contacts with that. I guess my question would be, were you planning on responding to our RFI? And if so, do you think that is something that you could include in those those comments?
Yeah, totally. I definitely plan to submit answers to the RFI, and I was highlighting both, you know, listening sessions for advocates and bike groups individually, because with the advocates and advocacy groups that are around the state, you know, I think Thomas was also commenting on marketing and how they might be an incredible resource to just help get the word around. And of course, you don't want to just keep it in the bike groups, but they may have other ideas and other connections elsewhere to help in your marketing efforts.
Awesome, thank you. And I have one more question for you. You mentioned an NREL app that was used in Colorado. Was that specific to Colorado, or was that something that would be applicable here in Connecticut? As we explore all of the options, obviously CT rides might be one of them, but we would like to be comprehensive in looking at all of the options. And if so, what was the name of it?
Yeah, I can write it in the chat here too, but it was specific to Colorado. I believe it
Okay.
was like a test app before, and then they worked a little harder on the coding in the back end to get it running specifically for the e-bike incentive pilot that they had in the state. But yeah, they used it specifically as an app to measure air quality benefits. And they actually just released a report on it as well, giving some ins and outs of the app and what the data was after the fact, after so many months of the program being in place. So a lot of great lessons learned there. I'd be happy to include it in my RFI comments in the.
Oh, that would be great. Awesome. Thank you very much.
And a quick add-on to Paul's question, Ashley, if I may, do you have any idea what the participation rate was for use of that app out of the number of e-bike incentives that went out?
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head, but I know that they did include like incentives, I believe, for the use of the app. And this incentive program was specific towards low income and essential workers in Colorado. So it was much more targeted, and a lot of like close relationships built with different pockets throughout the state to give out e-bikes to those communities. So it was a little bit different of a structure, but yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley, the next registered individual was Jacob Shepard Seidel. If you could unmute and.
Hey, I'm Jacob. I'm the BCCO shop manager here, running both of our BCCO shops as part of the Center for Latino Progress. Thomas mentioned some of the comments that I had earlier. I'm fortunate enough to be able to have a lull here in the shop so I can share a little bit more with y'all. I think a lot of the things I have to say have already been mentioned, but I do want to reiterate some of the things that I think are key. First of all, as has been mentioned a lot of times, it's super important that the process of getting this rebate is really clear, concise, and well communicated. Otherwise, we're not going to have folks that are actually using the program. Furthermore, it's, I think, highly important, especially to the communities that we're working with, that a driver's license is not required, a passport is not required, an address is not required. This needs to be accessible, especially to our folks that are the most in need, the most vulnerable, who may not have an address or a passport, and they're still able to get access to this program. Part of the reason that this is so exciting is that it's not an electric car program where you have to have $30,000 in the bank or $50,000 in the bank to be able to participate. This is an e-bike program where you are able to have successful, sustainable transportation that's good for the environment without having, a trust fund to sit back on. So being able for that to be accessible to everybody, I think is going to dictate whether the program is successful and is adopted, especially by our folks who are the most vulnerable, or if it's something that leads to continued like gentrification and use of our spaces in ways that are uninclusive. So that's been said before. The other thing that Thomas did mention, and that I have a little bit more perspective to share on, is what this might be like from a bike shop perspective. So here at BCCO, at the Center for Latino Progress, we are a very small nonprofit bike shop. We've got a couple of e-bikes in here, but they are highly expensive items, and often they will sit on the shelves when we're, especially when we're working with folks that aren't about to come into a bike shop and on a whim drop $3,000 on a bike. It's really important that there is some kind of incentive for bike shops to be purchasing these bikes and keeping them on our shelves. First of all, that's going to make it so that it's easier to access. You don't have to wait for an extended period of time if you don't have to. Right at the moment, if I was to order something, it might take up to a year or more for something to come into the shop. So we want stuff to be on the shelves so that they can easily go out the door. Second of all, we want the bikes that are being sold to be high quality bicycles. I've seen a lot of e-bikes especially over the last 5 years, as things are kind of ramping up in terms of e-bike production, that are incredibly unsafe to ride. And not only are they unsafe to ride, but they are going to be a money pit. So you're going to spend that initial $1,000 on an e-bike or $800 on an e-bike, and then a week later, it's going to be in the shop, and you're going to need to be replacing parts. You're going to need to replace the battery. You're going to need to replace the brakes. There's all kinds of things that are going to start happening to that bike because it was initially intended just to make some money for the company that's selling it. rather than to be a sustainable mode of transportation for years to come. So the bikes that I've seen that are really good, they generally start at about $1,500, and they'll go up from there up to that $3,000 cap for this program. So it needs to be, you know, something that, right, we need to encourage folks to be able to successfully buy bikes that are going to support them for a while, rather than buying something that's just going to fall into pieces or will potentially cause further issues in terms of like safety issues for folks riding in traffic. And that brings me to my last point, which is a bit tangential, although I think it is important to mention in this context, that just having an e-bike is not the end all be all. We really need to also focus our energy on safe, connected bike routes to ride those e-bikes on. I'm standing here at my bike shop, which is right outside of New Park Avenue in West Hartford, Connecticut, which is a treacherous street to ride on. That is a street I would not ride my bike on or feel safe about riding my bike on. So just having an e-bike is not enough. We also have to have safe routes so that people can get where they need to go, and they need to be connected routes, because just, you know, a mile of bike routes is not going to be enough. Let's say you have to go past that mile. So we need to have safe, connected bike routes so that, first of all, people that their only mode of transportation is a bicycle or an e-bike, that they're able to get where they need to go safely. And second of all, if our goal is to create sustainable lower emissions, that somebody that has the choice between a bike or a car is going to choose the bike because they can ride their bike, maybe they have their kid on the back, and they can still get where they need to go safely without getting into their car and being protected by that metal shield or whatever it is. So that's all I have to say. I really appreciate you all for having this meeting. I think the written comments, we might see a little bit more inclusion from folks that are working bike shops. I just happen to get lucky that I've got a little lull right now and I can share some things. But yeah, really appreciate all of this and excited for the rebate program to take place in Connecticut. Thank you.
Any follow-ups, questions for Jake?
I guess I have a quick one.
Oh, go ahead, Trace.
I was just going to say, anything you can do, Jacob, to help us drill down on this quality issue would be helpful. I was thinking, should it be linked to a warranty, or, you know, there might be some additional information that you have that would be helpful for us to understand on that issue.
Yeah, I mean, really, you know, it's kind of tough because there's no kind of rule across the board that's going to, you know, indicate that. You know, one thing that's almost a rule that I've seen is bikes that are coming from online retailers, like big retailers online, specifically Amazon or Walmart. Those have been incredibly low quality bikes that I've seen. There are good online retailers for e-bikes. Pretty much anything you're going to find in a local bike shop is going to be a high quality bike. But there's unfortunately no hard and fast rule that can be applied. And Rad Power Bike comments, that is an awesome online e-bike retailer. I've worked with their bikes a lot and they make really good stuff that works, is at the lower end of the price point range generally, so that they're affordable for folks and they do not fall apart when you touch them.
Jacob, if you could also include in your comments when you do get around to submitting them, your perspective on how long is an appropriate amount of time for the bike shop to sort of have to wait for reimbursement from the program. I know you guys are on tight budgets, but I assume, you know, there's got to be a number that would work for you, you know, 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, something like that. That would be good to have your perspective on that as well. And I'm also seeing a lot of comments in the chat, and you had issued the comment as well about not requiring any sort of ID or address or anything like that of a prospective consumer purchaser of an e-bike. If that's the case, given that DEEP is also required to verify incomes for especially the LMI community, how do we balance that? You know, and that's a challenge to everyone out there who's also issuing that same comment. Give us some ideas on how we can balance those competing priorities of not being too preclusive, being more inclusive, but not opening up the program to you know, tempting fraud or anything like that as well. So that would be something that I'd be interested in hearing more about as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Actually, I do have one more quick follow-up question for you. You mentioned concise and well-communicated communication and messaging with the e-bike, with the bike shops and the local bike shops. Obviously, we can use multiple forms of communication, but is there anything you would identify, emails, trade publications, websites, etc., that you think would be especially effective at getting our messaging out? And so you can answer it now or maybe in some comments later.
Yeah, I mean, I can just share quickly. I think, you know, the kind of communications I'm thinking about that are essential is going to be clear communications to the folks who are going to be interested in purchasing e-bikes and receiving the rebate. So how do they go about doing it? You know, what is the amount of the rebate, right? If somebody is coming into my shop, they have massive, you know, food insecurity and like wealth insecurity, where they need to know immediately from me, how much does this cost? And if I say to them, well, it's going to be $1,000, but you might be able to get this rebate potentially if you jump through these hoops, and it might be able to save you a couple $100, that's not going to work for them. They need to know, how much does it cost out the door today? You know, if I'm going to get this rebate, what do I need to do? What are the steps? Where is the website I need to go to? What information do they need from me? You know, as clear as possible. So forms are great, I think, for sharing information with other, you know, retailers. I think online information is great. Social media posts can be really helpful to get that information out there. But what I'm thinking about primarily is a well-designed form that can be handed to somebody that says in clear language, what is the program? How do you get involved? And what is required of you? What do you get out of it?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So I am going to move on to the next person. I don't know if anybody was tracking. I'm trying to go through here. I think that the first person who identified that they wanted to speak was Amy McLean.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Let me just turn on my camera. Oops, sorry. There's a little delay. So thank you all. First of all, I'm really glad I found out about this. You know, I know you guys sent it out 2 weeks ago. I happened to be on vacation. I don't know if I actually got a notice about it. And I just wanted to raise the awareness to this. I'm not sure if the cheaper board members were part of the notification. I just don't know. I don't think I knew about it, but then again, you know, that's probably not your fault. But anyway, I just wanted to I did get a call while I was on vacation from an ex-legislator who, former Speaker of the House, and, you know, anything that has to do with bikes or, you know, cheaper or energy, I get calls. So he said to me, why is this so difficult? And I said, well, you know, it's a new program. They're putting in the work to get, you know, the back end. We're doing the RFI, we're doing all this stuff. And his second question was, well, I don't see why it's taking so long. Okay, so you have this one perspective, right? And what about if my wife wants to buy a bike and she wants to buy it now, can she get the rebate retroactively? Another question. I said, not sure. Not sure if we have a mechanism to do that. I don't actually know if that's possible or if there's something that could be. So I think part of the problem here is that, you know, if this thing went into effect technically July, right? That's what he was saying. And I said, yes. And I said, but we're building it. But is there a possibility or a potential or a way for people who want to buy bikes now to be able to be put into some kind of queue, as long, and maybe there's a way to verify it and all that, that would be retroactively be able to recover the rebate? Because what he said to me was, and I said, you know, I think this is going to get ramped up and possibly going by, you know, first quarter of next year. And what he said was, well, that's the wintertime. I mean, you know, no one wants to buy a bike in the wintertime, you know, so there was just, this is just stream of consciousness, right? So, but this is the kind of thing that I think, you know, we should know is being asked. I'm really encouraged to hear all the progress that's been made so far. And I think, I know that this is a complicated thing and we want to do it right. But I just thought I would share. And also I agree so much with a couple of the other speakers who mentioned simplicity as being something that is incredibly important on this kind of thing. You guys started to go through, and I know I haven't looked at the RFI, and I'm probably, I'm not probably the right person to answer the questions there because I'm more of a generalist than I am a specific person on this issue. But I am hearing a lot of feedback similar to what someone else just said. I think it was Tomas who people are asking these questions once they realize a little bit more than most people. So I guess I'm just hoping that we don't make this as complicated, if possible, as the cheaper maybe program is, and or we're not requiring onerous things like the license or the passport or whatever it might be. I don't have the answers, and I know it's unfair of me to sit here and say, well, why didn't you do this? Well, it's feedback, okay? And I'm just giving it to you all because I don't know if we've thought about a retroactive kind of rebate system that while we're in the process of building the system could be something. I don't know. And then the only other piece of feedback I've gotten from an actual bike shop was like, I'm not going to order bikes if I don't know they're going to sell, right? So I think that's another issue for local bike shops because they just don't have the same scale of economy of scale that that auto industry does. So again, not things we probably haven't thought of before, but these are the kind of questions that are coming up. So I thought I would share that with you and just keep encouraging the great work that's moving forward here, because as someone else said earlier on the call, this is exciting stuff and it's happening everywhere. And we do have a chance to be, I think, a bit of a leader here. So thank you for the work that we're doing. I'm just encouraging us to not take our hand off the throttle, if you will. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. Any
a quick follow-up, Amy? Just
yep.
Yeah. So if the intent of the program is to be an incentive and to change behavior and to get someone out of a nice vehicle and into an e-bike, how does giving them a retroactive check for something they already purchased accomplish that policy goal?
That's a good question. Don't know the answer to that. I don't know. But
okay, I think if we did that, we would have to explain that. So
yes,
please,
no, I hear you.
So let us know.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, and I do think that those are the kind of sticky little like, oh yeah, didn't think of that, and then I'm sure that's sort of what. But I also I think it was Tomas, or I don't remember who. The marketing is huge, and I agree that you have to do it the right way. But the bike community, as someone else said, I think it was Kate, already know about it, right? So it's like, how are we advertising this bigger than the bike community? And what are we thinking? Someone said billboards, someone said radio. And then you asked the question, Paul, about like, what's the timing of that? Well, maybe the timing of it is, this is coming in December, and this is coming in 2023. And we start ramping up the marketing now with the date of 2023, because I don't think everybody knows about this. And I know they don't. But on the other hand, it's almost like filling the pipeline, right? So you're like 2023 e-bike incentives, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's as simple as that, but starting now instead of waiting until 2023 is one way of thinking about maybe kind of marketing initially.
Yeah, I think
that's all I got.
I think you can say, this is Paul Wessel from Greater New Haven Clean Cities. I think you can say the program's starting, we'll accept applications after September 1st, but we haven't set up the apparatus, so you won't be able to apply until January 1 or whatever. And not that we should aspire to do what Congress does, but Congress does retroactive incentives all the time. So it's not unheard of in government.
And one last thing, I do like the messaging of bikes as transportation. And I think we need to continue to push that forward. Thanks, Paul. You gave an answer that I didn't have. I appreciate that. But I do think bikes as transportation is also incredibly important.
Thank you. Looking at the chat, it looks like the next person who has requested to speak is Darren Parks.
Sorry, if I can get myself off mute there. Sorry, I apologize for that.
Hi, Darren. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you all again for hosting this session. And let me start out by, first of all, thanking Jacob for your kind words about RAD. RAD Power Bikes is an all-electric bike company. It is our mission really to build bikes that, quality bikes that are priced for everyone. And so all of our bikes fall under $2,000 per bike, but we stand behind the quality of those bikes. We're a direct-to-consumer brand, and the overwhelming majority of our bikes are sold online, though we do have several retail locations, company-owned retail locations, and most of those are out west, though we are opening 2 East Coast locations this year in New York City and in Tampa, Florida. So we will have some East Coast locations very, very soon. A couple of quick points that I wanted to make. First, I think in working with retailers, ensuring flexibility versus rigidity in program requirements and the way that the things that the state is looking for. We've been working with different programs throughout the country, and one of the issues that we've run into is different types of bike shops have different point of sale systems. And so in those point of sale systems, it may, when you add the rebate or the voucher at point of sale, which I 100% would advocate for this program to have a point of sale voucher, but it may look differently on one point of sale system than it looks on another point of sale system. For example, because you have to take the full amount of tax on a product. So if just using an example of the product's $1,000, 6% tax, $60, and it may on one point of sale system, if it's a $500 voucher, take off $500 from the full cart and you have the $60 that shows up, or it may take off $440 from the product. The tax is still the proper amount, but because of the way that the point of sale system looks, it looks different, and different programs have objected to those types of things. But I think it's important for the state to understand and be flexible about the way different shops will have different point of sale systems, and really work with the retailers. I would suggest setting up a listening session just with retailers. Some of those issues are, not stuff that the rest of the, whether it be advocacy community or the general public, wants to sort of sit and listen through. Not that they can't, but having one focused on retailers, I think will help you all dig into what some of those potential issues are. Tracy, you mentioned ways to separate sort of good versus bad actors in the among e-bike retailers or e-bike manufacturers. I do think that warranties are a good way. You should probably consider a minimum 1-year warranty But I also think that you should ask retailers to register for the program. I think that having folks that, and I don't mean some long, complicated process. I simply mean a a simple, easy registration, so that the state has the retailer to agree to the program terms, but also has a point of contact with every retailer that they can talk to and that they can have a dialogue with and resolve any issues. So I would suggest that. In terms of outreach, one thing I would suggest is partnering with other state agencies on outreach to get folks information about the program. So when someone goes in to apply for benefits at a state agency, or renew a driver's license, or however they otherwise interact with the state, particularly with those agencies and programs that have higher interaction with lower middle income individuals, I would suggest that there be information on the program in those locations and with those services. I think that's one way of prioritizing EJ communities, low and middle income individuals. I think another way of prioritizing is simply prioritizing the application in terms of the queue. If there's a queue to approve the voucher, a process to approve the voucher, that if someone checks the box that they are a part of one of those communities, or input it with the zip code or however it's done, and or that they receive state benefits, that their applications go to the front of the line and they are processed first. I think that's a better solution than instituting income caps generally, right? I think the program should be open to all, but that the language is prioritization, and I think that's a way that you all can try to prioritize those communities. I think that is all I will touch on for now, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank
Aaron,
you,
thank you very
Darren.
much. Just a quick follow-up on the coupon and the tax issue. Is that to a certain extent a function of each state's tax code?
Yes.
My thinking is, does a coupon, if you apply a coupon to a product, that lowers the entire price of the product, and it should, in my mind, lower the amount of tax on that particular product. So if you buy something for $10, you get a $5 coupon, you're only paying tax on $5.
Yes, except I actually did have our much smarter than me attorneys look at it. And in all the programs that we are a part of now, as well as Connecticut state law, it is my understanding that because the retailer will be reimbursed, that they are responsible for collecting the tax on the full amount. So you're correct that if you were to get $5 off that $10 item and never recover that extra $5, then yes, you only pay the tax on the $5. But since you're recovering that $5, you have to pay the full tax on the full product price.
We'll definitely circle back with our revenue department too to clarify that as we move forward. Thank you.
Feel free to change state law if I'm right.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to do.
Yeah, right. We'll just do that. I had a follow-up question for you. You said you were predominantly an online retailer, and presumably you've interacted with programs in other states. And by that I mean rebate programs in other states. In what form and how does that interaction happen? Like, so for us with cheaper, obviously all of the entities are which cheaper is our vehicle or light duty vehicle program. All of the entities are in the state. Do you have any insights or experiences on how being an online retailer has gone when interacting with other e-bike retail rebate programs in other states? And is there anything that has worked or anything that you think doesn't work at all? We're just interested in that.
I could probably take the full 2-hour session on things that don't work. But you know, what I will say is quite frankly, it starts with, and this is going to sound you know, probably a little bit cliche, but it actually starts with a desire for the program to work with an online retailer. Like, if there are many programs who enact policies that I believe are purely set up to be protectionist for their local entities, their local bike shops, and while I understand the desire to promote and boost you know, the local economy in that respect, what I would say is that oftentimes you know, online retailers have a greater selection at a better price. And so I'll use one program, for example, where that we became a part of. Before we became a part of the program, the cheapest electric cargo bike was $5,400. Whereas, and that was just with the retailers that they had in the program. You know, when they brought us on, our most expensive e-cargo bike is $2,000. So a huge difference for someone trying to, you know, acquire a cargo bike, which are extraordinarily important in, you know, changing, you know, people's transportation behaviors is having that e-cargo bike. So I think there were unintended consequences to this particular program being so, you know, initially focused on just local retailers, because that they just didn't have the selection of more accessible bikes. You know, there are programs that want to require not just, you know, an ID, and I know lots of folks have talked about IDs, but not just having an ID in order to sign up for the program, but wanted a picture ID when someone came to purchase the bike, well, with a voucher. Well, the problem, that's obviously presents a huge problem for an online retailer, because, you know, we'll have to establish some type of video chat, and then they were like, no, you can't do video chat, it has to be live. And, you know, that literally eliminates our ability to participate in the program. So I seriously, I mean, I have a ton of examples. I do think what I would say is a robust system of talking and sharing information and going back and forth is really, really important, rather than edicts coming down on retailers before. I'll give one more example. One program changed the definition of e-cargo bikes. So they had one voucher amount for regular e-bikes and one voucher amount for e-cargo bikes. During the program, as we were selling bikes, they sent an email out to retailers and say, hey, the definition has changed as of today of what you know, qualifies as this type of bike. Well, you know, that creates extraordinary burden on the consumer and on the retailer. You know, someone may have come in last week and, you know, been looking at a certain bike, and we said the rebate amount was this amount, and then they come back next week to effectuate the purchase, and now that's not the case. So just, you know, constant communication, I think, is really, really important. Having a designated person within the company that you can talk to, and vice versa, that the company can talk to at DEEP, I think is important.
Well, thank you for those comments. I don't know if anybody else has any other follow-ups.
This is more of a comment. I like your registration idea, and I'm thinking, you know, that might be a step that we want to do earlier on, just to, you know, get that process going. And then that provides a mechanism for the type of communication and ongoing dialogue that I think, you know, would be helpful to make sure We don't do the things that you said you have 2 hours worth of what we shouldn't be doing.
I do think that's a good idea, Tracy, to start early. I would, simply add, making sure that you're open to adding additional participants, the participating retailers as time goes on, right?
Yeah.
Because we are lucky enough to know about this going on, but I'm sure that there are competitors who don't know that this program is starting, and when they get whiff of it, in a month or in 2 or whenever, they should be able to compete as well.
Yep. Makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. That's very helpful. Looking through the chat, I don't see anybody else who is identified as wanting to speak. So I will throw this out here. If there is anybody else, please let us know. We do have a few slides to close up, so we can move to those slides. And if you do would like to speak, please let us know quickly. Thank you. And I'll move it. I believe Paul is taking over, or is it Tracy? Paul.
I think it's Paul.
Sure. I get the envious job of managing your expectations for when you're actually going to see this program. You can tell I drew the short straw. So there's really only 2 slides really that I have left to cover here to wrap us up and get everyone on their way and yield back a little of your time today. But the first one is really just a high-level overview of the time frame and the steps that we're going to be taking within those time frames. And if it looks like a short and winding road, it's actually a long and winding road. Apologies to George Harrison. But there's a bit of work still to be done. So we're right there in that short-term green marker, really at the beginning stages of gathering the information that we need to develop a cohesive and coherent scope of work that is really going to need to define the 4 corners of the program before we even go out and look for a vendor or contractor to implement the program on our behalf. So this is an incredibly crucial stage of program development right now. I can't understate that enough to you guys. Right now is when we're getting all the information and trying to do our best to create a world-class leading program that's going to be all things to all people. It's hard, it is, and that's why we really need your help to do this. And we're going to be having more of these discussions as we go forward, I'm sure. So the RFI deadline, July 27th, we're going to need to assimilate all that information and determine whether we need to have another listening session or whether we have enough information to really develop an outline of a program, which then I'm sure there's going to be another set of some type of public participation on that before we even issue a scope of work. Because we haven't even touched on some of the thorniest issues out there. How much is the rebate going to be? Who's going to get it? All of that sort of stuff. We want to have a dialogue about those elements of the program as well. So, probably going to see another one of these programs, maybe 2, I'm not sure. Then once we have all of that assimilated, then it's the scope of work, and then it's the obligation falls more into Deep's lap to push this out to vendors, to assess vendors' responses, who's going to deliver the program that we need at the best value for Connecticut's residents. And then after we select that vendor, then you implement, you develop the contract, and you put the fine tooth or fine point on the dollars and the budgets and how much we're putting towards the program and all that stuff. Then the vendor has to build it. And in that time period, I'm sure as they're building the program, that's when we're really going to ramp up our marketing effort, getting the word out, making sure that people know this program is coming and on its way. And that's why, with apologies to the folks that wanted this July 1, it was just not ever conceivable to have this program up at that time. And we're doing our best in moving as quickly and as decisively as possible, knowing there's great interest in this, in getting it up by Q1 of 2023. Tracy, you can go to the next slide. This is also, just really an expanded view of that oversimplification of what we need to do over the next several quarters. And this is not our slide, so I'm not going to take credit or blame for it. I think we borrowed it from an incentive program or some market document. But it really shows in greater detail the types of thorny questions that we need to answer. And it's a lot of policy. It's also a lot of practical implications of how we design and run the program. So the shifting from the goals of the program to identify your target populations, the type of bicycles that are going to be covered, or e-bikes that are going to be covered, incentive design, we want to incentivize, or do we want to have retroactive incentives as well? So that discussion needs to occur. The application process, we are hearing loud and clear that it needs to be simple, but the legislation, by virtue of the way it's written, makes it sort of complicated. We need to determine for certain entities or certain individuals that are not participating in one of those enumerated state assistance or federal assistance programs, what their income is. There's a process, there's a cost to doing that, there's a timeline to doing that. That's going to need to be developed and built into the program. So these are all the workflows that we're going to have to work together when we do identify a vendor to implement the program, is how we do that. Then lastly, then the fun part. Once it's built and we get to roll it out and we get to have, I don't know what the equivalent is of a ride and drive for an e-bike, but sign me up. I'd love to be there for one. I'd love to see people jump on an e-bike for the first time and experience that sort of instant power, that you get from one of those things when you hit the pedals. I think that'd be great. And I think it would be great to, run these things out into the neighborhoods and into where folks that we're trying to reach with this type of mobility are, and meet them, in their neighborhoods and in their areas. That'd be great. So that, in a nutshell, there's a lot of work still to do here, and it's going to take a little bit of time, and we're hoping that you guys are going to assist us in this effort long term and be with us as we stand up the program and as we run through iterations, because one thing I've learned is we're not going to get it right the first time around. There's going to be something that we're going to need to tweak, and we're going to iterate on the program and make it better with time and with input from both the users and the retailers and the activist community. So that's sort of in a nutshell where we're going and why I think it's going to take into early next year to stand this program up. With that, I think we can, on behalf of Deep, say thank you for your time today. This was incredibly helpful from my perspective. I heard a lot of good comments. I'm looking forward to seeing additional comments submitted before the 27th to really help us hone our thinking on this entire e-bike incentive program.
And just to also jump in,
yeah,
I just want to add my thanks as well, and also we have stood up an e-bike webpage. Walter and Joe Cunningham in our communications group has done a great job with a logo, so you should check out that page. I know Walter also posted in the chat the link to our EV Connecticut mailing list. And, I know Amy mentioned this in terms of, getting information out. We're using several channels, and we'll continue to do that as we kind of, try to build a dedicated list. But we will, check out the page just to, we'll be posting any updates there. I also just want to mention our next Cheaper board meeting is September 15th. That will be a regular forum where we'll be providing updates to the Cheaper board, as we continue to develop this e-bike program. So that'll be another place for additional information and feedback as we update the board on our progress from one quarterly meeting to another. And with that, I just again like to thank everyone, and we look forward to your comments and your responses. So encourage everyone to submit your thoughts and suggestions to us, and appreciate all your time. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Bye. Because I could stop recording, right?